What's up, DIY Queens? It's your design bestie, Kara Newhart, and this is Make Space.
What's up? It's Kara, and welcome back to Make Space. Today, we are doing a little bit of what is in and out for 2024. A little late in getting this episode out. We're a couple weeks into the new year, but I've actually been in New York filming an episode for the Tamron Hall show, which comes out on the 19th. So that's the delay. So check that out when it comes out. We did a bunch of DIY demos, and it was very exciting and also really wild being on live TV. Okay, let's get into this. So I am going to be covering some trends, what I think is coming up for this year. But I first want to start out with a little disclaimer about trends, because I think when people hear trends, if you don't already have a really strong sense of your style, trends can totally sway you and distract you and pull you into things you think you should be doing that might not actually be a fit for you. So just remember that trends are not prescriptive, they're not here to tell you what you should do, but instead they're explorative. It's what you could do. So if you are struggling to find inspiration, you can look to current trends for something that you could try out in your space to see if you like. So, yeah, and also some context for where we're at in the year. I feel like our society likes to use New Year's as a time for fresh starts, starting new things, setting resolutions. But in terms of nature, and we did a whole episode kind of about this, we are still in winter. We are still in hibernation. We are still sleeping. So if you do not feel like you want to dive in and start a bunch of projects and start new things, that's totally normal. This is still kind of a rest period. And then spring is the natural, normal time to start new things. So don't feel bad if you're not feeling inspired to get on your resolutions or be springing into action, because that's not happening yet. Okay, so with trends, and we talk about this a lot, but basically a trend is when we all collectively decide to explore a specific creative point of view at a specific time. So we're all kind of we like this paint color, and everyone's going to try out the paint color in all different kinds of ways, and it's going to be really popular. And so trends come in waves, trends come in cycles. And normally what happens is there's a trend like farmhouse, and then there's a counter trend like super modern white interiors that are very earthy. Or there's a trend tons and tons of color. And then the next trend is white and neutrals. And so normally whatever trend is rising, the next wave is going to be reactive and usually opposite of what is popular. So that's why things tend to flip back and forth. That being said, we've been in an era of white, neutral, gray, and now we're shifting into an era of lots of color in many different ways. So we will cover that. I have some specific color trends and paint color trends to go over. But first, I just want to dive into just some general home trends that I'm seeing. And remember, these are things you can explore, not things you have to explore. Don't feel like you have to change your whole house. But it is fun if you're feeling tired of your space, you want to try something new, and you don't know what that is. These are some things you can look to. Okay, number one is dark wood tones. There was an era there where we were just light wood tone everything, and it was a lot of whitewashing, chippy paint, painted wood, bleaching wood, and staining everything really light beech wood tones. And now we're kind of swinging into the opposite direction with darker wood tones are back. I think the two things driving this is, number one, a lot of vintage and thrifted furniture. This trend started sort of in the pandemic when it was really hard to source things. You couldn't get things shipped, and there was a lot of shipping delays, and also just the price of everything going up. People started turning more towards vintage, thrifted, Goodwill furniture flips. So dark wood tones, it's people would buy furniture and maybe not immediately paint it and then realize this dark color is actually not so bad. And that's fitting into the larger trend of we've been really neutral and white for a really long time, and now we're kind of swinging back towards moody, dark hues. So we're doing our wood tones to match. So yeah, ways you can explore this is to refinish your furniture if you love the piece and want a new tone, or when you're sourcing thrifted pieces, look for those dark wood pieces and don't worry about painting them. You can just clean them up, use them as is. I really like dark wood tones. I think it's like a really good way to add like depth to your space without having to paint the room itself like a darker color, which in some spaces just makes the whole room feel dark and cave-like. So that can be fun. Another trend that's coming up is mix and match cabinetry. So we are exiting the era of all white and gray kitchens. And I've had my share of those. Like, listen, I had 2 new builds and that's exactly what they were. I loved them for what it was, but also I didn't have any better ideas, if we're being honest. So now doing my own kitchen, my style's a little more like eclectic, collected, mix and matchy, where some people is not. They want all the cabinets to be the same color. They like that light and airy look, which is a vibe. Like, it's nice and clean and crisp. So if you like that, that's fine, okay? But if you don't, mixing and matching can be really interesting. So things that I'm seeing is like maybe white upper cabinets, really dark, moody lower cabinets, like maybe like a navy blue or a charcoal, and then kitchen islands that are like wooden. I'm seeing a lot of like, it's sort of like repurposed work tables used as an island. So not even necessarily like cabinets. It looks like a big work table, but with matching countertops. I really like that because it's like mixing old and new. And it adds a lot of interest and warmth, and is also movable. If you don't like fully connect the island, you can move it, which is even more versatile. But there's a lot of different versions of mix and match cabinetry. There's like wood tones and painted, there's light and dark, there's beige and white, but a lot of like adding depth and interest to the kitchen by not having everything be the same color cabinetry wise. That is a trend that's kind of on the rise. The interesting thing about the current wave, and I would say the main like tenet of the current wave of design, interior design trends, is color. Like, we're inviting color and pattern and maximalism back into our spaces, but it's coming in like a lot of different forms and iterations. So there's waves of like the older like demographic is exploring like old world Victorian. And this isn't like across the board. Like, there's young people into this as well, but kind of like transitioning farmhouse, which is very rustic, very like rough, sort of like things, into more of like an old world Victorian, which means there's more ornate gold frames and there's like brass candlesticks and ornate mirrors and little moments of things that are still antique, collected, vintage, but aren't necessarily like rustic, like chippy paint and rough sewn wood and that kind of thing. If you go type modern Victorian into Pinterest, that will give you a visual of what I'm meaning by this trend. But basically, it's kind of like farmhouses evolving. Like, if you're not going to, like, let's say you redid your whole house in the farmhouse style and you're now getting tired of it. Instead of redoing it, a lot of people are evolving this style to have more ornate pieces, look a little more sophisticated, include more modern elements, gold finishes, and kind of take it that direction instead of like redoing things. So that's one wave of this trend. That's also looking like dark, moody tones. So dark greens, dark blues, even dark browns, burnt orange, but kind of like deep tones. So we're going more moody, darker with the paint colors. The second wave that's also really colored based is the Gen Z wave. And so this is brighter tones. It's a lot of like 90s comeback stuff, bright, vibrant, like neons and purples and pinks and rainbow colors, kind of like 70s inspired, because a lot of the 90s trends were inspired by 70s prints and patterns and colors. So that's coming around for like a second time, which is interesting. So both of these are colorful reactions to the neutral that we had going, which was a lot of like beige and white, everything, like everything. But that's like the younger version. And so that's different because it's like brighter colors versus the dark, moody colors, and the design elements, instead of being like gold, ornate, that sort of thing, it's more like wavy shapes, like a wavy mirror or a bubble chair or a really interesting accent table that's like acrylic or colorful. So those are kind of the two trend waves that are in response to this white neutral thing we've had going for a while now. With both of these, we're seeing bolder prints and patterns and kind of this vibe of like collected versus bought, which I've said this for a long time. In a world where anything can arrive from Amazon in 2 days on your porch, it is more interesting to have a house that you curate over time with meaningful things than a room you just buy all in one go. And I think enjoying the process of that, like whether that's going to the thrift store or farmers markets or collecting things on your travels or even buying from box stores, but doing it little by little instead of like a bunch of things that are made to go together, is just kind of like where, trends are going, and a little more sustainable in terms of how to decorate your house. For things that I personally can't get enough of, I'm going to say plants, because you can never have too many plants. They just breathe so much life into a space. Caring for plants can be such a fun hobby. We have a few really amazing episodes about plants with Nick, who is the plant coach, and Hilton Carter. Both of those are amazing and really good for if you're a beginner and you want to know how to incorporate plants in your space, but you feel like you kill everything and aren't very good at it. Go check out both of those episodes. But yeah, you can also opt for fake plants. Like, it doesn't have to be real plants, especially if you're working with a space with low light, because realistically, you can't put plants in every corner that you want them in from like an aesthetic point of view, because they need light and they need care and they need to be happy in that sense. So yeah, feel free to go. Like, fake plants totally have the same vibe, but aren't as much maintenance. So don't feel bad about using those. I know some people are very offended by fake plants. I think there's so many good options that look really realistic and totally work for your space. In terms of what's out, and again, out does not mean you're outdated if you have it. It just means collectively we are deciding to go in a different direction. It is all white and neutral interiors. The world doesn't need another gray and white room, in terms of that's what all the new builds are looking like, and everyone doing like run-of-the-mill quick flips or renovations where they're not really intentionally designing it for themselves or an interior designer isn't involved. It's still just gray and white everything, because it's like a blank slate, which you can add to later. So it's like if you paint the room orange, there's a specific kind of person that's going to like that. Or if you do it white, it pretty much appeals to everyone. So the reason this is out is because it's just like mass appeal. It's a blank slate, and it, to feel personalized, needs a little more involved. So that's that. I may still be putting white cabinets in my kitchen. So it's like, that's the trend, but do what you want to do. Okay, let's dive into some specific color trends. This is actually an article I participated in for Martha Stewart Living, and they covered 5 different paint trends. And I thought this was really good to talk about. So the first one is monochrome, which is also known as color drenching. Essentially, this is painting one room all the same color. So like the ceiling, the walls, and maybe even the trim, all the same color. And here's my quote from the article. I said, "I'm loving monochrome rooms in a deep, moody tone like dark everglade or midnight blue from Behr. Painting the walls, ceiling, and trim all the same color makes things like wood tones and lighting pop in the space." This is really interesting because it can give your room a very like elevated luxe designer look, because going all the same color in a room is a very like bold choice. But it's also easy because you don't have to mix and match multiple tones. Like, you just pick a color you like and go all out. What I will say for this trend, what I'm seeing is it come across as a lot of like those dark tones we talked about, like navy blues, dark greens, and browns. But if you're choosing this for your space, make sure you get like a really muted color. And you actually want to go a little lighter than you think. Like you don't want like the blackest black that you can find. It's going to look dark just because the whole like room is painted that color. So go a little lighter than you think you need to. Also go a little more muted. And that means when you go to the paint wall and you think you want navy blue, do not pick the color that looks like navy blue. You're actually going to get something more muted, which means it's actually a little more gray. And on the card, it might look like a gray, but once you get it into the room and it's all over the place, it's going to look very blue. To achieve this trend, you're going to need a lot of sampling, and you're going to need to try it out in all kinds of lights. So like at night, it's going to look very different than during the day. And I would just really sample before you go all out and paint a whole room one color. Spaces this works best for is offices, maybe bedrooms. I personally would not do this in a living room or a kitchen. So that's my recommendation on where to try that. A related trend is mixing and matching finishes. So this is essentially similar to monochrome or painting the whole room one color, but in this case, there's different elements that are going to be different sheens. So sheens are like satin, gloss, so like shiny paint versus matte, very flat, chalky looking paint. So you can actually paint things the same color, like the walls and your trim, but do them in different sheens. Like the trim might be shiny and the walls might be matte or flat. This is a way to use the same color, but kind of play around with the light in your room and have that bring the contrast and kind of like statement. Something I'm seeing with this that a lot of people are saying is trending that I don't like is glossy ceilings. So it's essentially like the whole ceiling is painted a color, which may or may not be the same color as the walls. And it's like high gloss, very shiny, like lacquered ceiling. This can be very interesting. It's a very high-end artful look, but it's real hard to achieve because glossy paint has to be painted on a very flat surface. Like if there are any imperfections or dings or dirt, like that's going to look really, I don't want to say cheap, but it's going to look not very well done and not like good craftsmanship. So that one I don't really love. So yes, keep that in mind if you're seeing gloss ceilings pop up in trends and you're like, ooh, I really want to try it. Just know that that one is one where it's harder than it looks because it really needs to be a very flat surface. The painting process needs to be very smooth. Like it's best if it's done with a sprayer by a professional versus a roller. Like you're going to see lines and it's not going to give you that high-end look that you're going to see in the photos. The next paint trend that I like, that I don't know if it's like a overall everyone's doing this trend or if it's just me, but I like painted flooring. So this has been a big trend with the farmhouse like for probably like 5 years now. And it used to be that stenciling was super big. So everyone was like painting their floors white using stencils and adding like sort of those pattern tile looks. Or just like white painted floors was also very trendy. But I'm loving like different patterns that are unique and interesting and textured, whether on like concrete or we actually did it in the sunroom of the Mulberry Manor house that we're working on. That's like the 1840s dumpster fire. And all of the flooring was like damaged and water damaged and like in fine structural condition, like it can still work, but it just looked real bad. So we had to end up painting it, and that's how we saved it instead of having to buy new flooring. But the pattern was not like the stencil era kind of look. We did a plaid pattern with white and beige and then little blue lines. And so I think we're going to be seeing more interesting flooring options that are not just like adding new flooring, kind of different ways to revive existing flooring so you don't have to spend a lot of money, and utilizing paint, but not necessarily in the stenciled sort of way. One more painting hack is the textured paint or faux chalk paint. So you may have seen this as the viral baking soda hack, which has been going for a few years now, where basically you take regular latex interior paint and you mix baking soda in. It gives it a little bit more texture, and it's kind of like an old school way to create chalk paint. And people do it with like thrifted glassware and then painting it with this paint. It looks kind of grainy and sandy, and it makes things look like pottery. So it's a really good way to up level pieces you already have, like smaller decor pieces. I've actually done it on walls in my bathroom, and it looked like terracotta because I used this like orangey color. So I like that hack, but the better way to actually do it is instead of using baking soda, I like to mix in plaster of Paris. It gives it a similar like grainy textured vibe, but it's going to hold together better because the plaster of Paris is going to be a little bit harder and more durable. I did this with my ornaments for Christmas. I painted all these old glass ornaments with this style of paint, but you can also do vases, you can do lamps, you can do like a little, I don't know, like a stool or something that you want to kind of look like concrete or textured or pottery. And that's a really good hack. I think we'll still be exploring this trend because it's just like really good texture. It's a really approachable way to transform something, and you can use any color. So I really like that trend also. So those are the big like paint trends in terms of color, texture, finishes. And aside from that, yeah, I would just say like the two waves of what's going to be big in 2024 is old world Victorian, kind of on the rise, mixing and matching like antiques, thrifted finds, that collected look of like old world style, but with a modern twist. So whether that's like modern light fixtures or really modern furniture mixed in a room with like wall trim and antique vibes, kind of that old and new mix. And also like the Gen Z modern, like wavy mirrors, neon colors, 90s vibes. Those are the two big design waves for 2024. There's a lot of different elements within those that you can explore and test out in your spaces. But yeah, always remember that trends are just here to be like explored. So it might not even be something that you put in your house. Like it could just be exploring trends as a way to be like, let's see what people are doing, like get inspiration. And the things you decide to put in your house may have nothing to do with either of those trends, but based on someone's project idea, it like sparks an idea, whether they're using wallpaper or building something, and then you can kind of find a way to create your own thing. So I would encourage you to explore trends as a way to get inspiration, not to get a prescriptive, like, here's what you should do. But yeah, that's, I feel like, what we're going to see in 2024. Lots of moody tones, dark tones, patterns, maximalist vibes, and then the two big waves of Gen Z style and old world Victorian style. So that's what I'm loving. I'm personally leaning more towards the old world Victorian vibe because I have an 1840s house. So it's kind of perfect to feel like I can mix, like honor some of the old architecture and mix in new elements. And so I'm loving like thrifted brass candlesticks and frames. I'm doing a lot of like thrifted artwork where I change the artwork or paint over it and keep the frame. So those are some like little projects I'm loving. But yeah, get on Pinterest, click around. They also do Pinterest also does, what's it called? It's like Pinterest trends where they kind of do Pinterest predicts. That's what it's called. So if you want more trend ideas, look that up. The basic idea is that Pinterest is like a planning platform. So people are pinning things that they're going to use later. So based on what people are pinning, Pinterest can kind of anticipate what trends are going to come out. And they always have really interesting ones, which I should have gone through some of those here. But those are interesting too. If you're into trends, into keeping track of what's new and interesting and what you can try, I would do that as your next step for some visuals for what you could do. And if you're not into trends, you do you. Whatever you love is what's going to be better than a trend. So that's all I have for you. That's what's in and out for 2024. and let me know like what you're planning to do. Which trends are you planning to explore? Which projects are you tackling? You can shoot a DM over to Make Space Pod on Instagram. Feel free to show me your projects with pictures, ask questions. We'll do another like mailbag question episode coming up soon. But yeah, until then, see you next week.
Thanks for listening. And if you've got more episodes to catch up on, binge on. Don't let me stop you. But if you've got a second, you should come say hi on Insta at MakeSpacePod. And if you're an overachiever, you can also leave a review and I'll love you forever. If you're new here, hit that follow button to officially become a DIY queen and join all the amazing humans tuning in every week.